Walker Cook-Stanowski, and this week my wife and I, Marie, had the chance to take home the Eternal Flame and tend it and have it in our house for the week, as we've been doing each week. And I'd encourage any of you who haven't taken it yet but are going to be around and have the opportunity to talk to Pastor Aaron after, and it's been fun to take it home. And so a little reflection on its presence in our lives this week. We've been in a new house for a couple of months now. Both have been running around a lot, doing a lot of work around the house. Things are busy and out of place, and frankly, I don't think that we had or took a lot of time to sort of sit and contemplate on the flame in a very directed way. But we were talking about it, and Marie and I both grew up in the United Methodist Church. And so for us, there has always been a little eternal flame kind of up in the corner in the front of worship, and it's not something that has been a focus of a lot of conversation over the years or attention during worship. But it's just sort of there, and your eye falls on it from time to time. It might be when the lights are low during a contemplative Christmas service, or it might be, in the middle of a boring service when you'd rather be out in the sun. Never Trinity, of course, but it's always just sort of there, but not something we've ever discussed much. But it's just sort of a part of the sense of spiritual home that we have grown up with. And so to have the chance to take it and set it on our mantle and just have this little consistent thread of spiritual home that we got to bring into our new home has been a really nice thing. But for me, it's also been a reminder of how easy it is to sort of take for granted our spiritual heritage and our community, and to just let the light and the call to live out God's vision, to just let that fade into the backdrop of life. And for me, I think this time in this space for Trinity, I hope will be a good chance for us all to kind of refresh ourselves and rest and relax, as Pastor Aaron has talked about since the move, but really to start also focusing on who we are as a community and who we want to be, and how, when we go back out from this temporary home, we can really be ready and have a plan for how we're going to engage actively in some of the ways that we've had to leave behind while we're here. And for myself, that's something that I haven't taken a huge role in this church so far. And so for me, for now, and I'd invite anyone else who feels the same way, for now, when my eye falls on that little red flame and kind of the backdrop of worship, I'm going to try and take that as a moment for my unconscious mind to, shake my consciousness a little bit by the collar and just call myself to think about, what am I doing this week to help build that vision and that plan, and to make this community ready to go back out and re-engage in the world. So that is my little reflection on our little eternal light. Thank you.
Today is the fourth Sunday of Lent. Lent being the 40 days leading up to Easter. Easter's coming. It's coming really, really quickly. It's on its way. 40 days, often reflective of the 40 days Jesus spent in the wilderness, fasting and praying, being tempted. So it's set aside as a season of self-reflection. So we here at Trinity, our community, has been using something called the Enneagram, this word right here. It's a compound word. Ennea just means 9. Gram comes from the Greek word gramma. If this image is darkened and you have trouble seeing it, it's also on your bulletin on the inside page there. You can look there. Gram or gramma meaning diagram or drawing. It's really, this idea is a 9-pointed drawing. The circle represents wholeness. And we start with this idea that we have all of these types within us, and all of them are represented here. But at some point in our life, we tend to gravitate towards one way of being in the world. And different people talk about that differently. Sometimes it's through stress or trauma or learning to cope, but really it's just how we navigated life in a broken world. And we do that differently. Thomas A. Kempis wrote Deep Learning. This idea that as we look within ourselves We find a little bit of humility because we begin to see some of our own junk and struggles and everything else, which makes us less judgmental at everybody else's struggles and junk, right? And humble in that way. And then we're able to move out into the world in a more humble, loving way. So there's been two main goals through this series. One, hopefully, to create a greater compassion for other people who think and do things differently than you do. And the second thing is to help us through self-awareness, observation, and even begin to explore some spiritual practices. So today we're going to talk about 5 and 6. And the thing that I like to kind of suggest is that if you're a 5, you tend to gravitate towards the 5. And there's things that hook you in that 5 way of being, which we'll talk about. And the goal is, through observation and awareness, to begin to unleash those hooks, to kind of move a little bit more towards the center. And even if you don't know the Enneagram, you've probably looked at your life and said, there's things that hook me, that trip me up, that I get caught in, whether that's anger or fear or resentment or envy or whatever it is that we begin to be aware of. And the Enneagram is basically a map. It's a framework to help us on that process through self-reflection and spiritual formation. So today we're going to talk about 5 and 6. You could be that type, or you know somebody who is that type. So pay attention. Right? Where we have been, really quick, we started with 8 because there's something called the triads. And there's 3 groupings of 3, 8, 9, and 1 are in the body triad. They're the more instinctual people. They're the ones that have an underlying struggle with anger. Not that they're the Hulk or they're always angry or anything like that. They just have this underlying struggle with anger that they share. 2, 3s, and 4s, which is my triad, they're the most image conscious, so they care more what other people think. And they struggle more with shame, feelings of inadequacy. And then 5, 6, and 7, where we're going today, is the head triad. Once again, you have all of these in. You have a heart, you have a body, you have a head, right? But we're talking about the head. These are thinking people. The underlying struggle that they all share and they all have in common, the 5, 6, and 7, is fear. And that's reflected differently. So if you pull out your bulletin, there's a little insert in there. What we've been doing is we've been walking through, giving a description of each type. Today we're going to talk about 5 and 6. It's a lot of information. I'll try to draw a few stories in there. But as we begin, the type 5 is sometimes called the observer or the investigator. The core motivation, and this is the thing to hone in on, if you're looking for who you are, is what motivates me. The core motivation for the type 5 is to be capable, to be competent, to understand. And what we're learning as we're doing like a small group on Wednesday evenings is another way of asking this is what do you most fear? So for the 5, the thing that they often most fear is being in a situation where they feel incapable, they don't feel competent, they don't feel like they've been given or have enough knowledge, and they're asked to do something. So put in that situation. So some adjectives then, and the rest of this is just ways of helping describe what this kind of person is. Some adjectives: perceptive, innovative, self-sufficient, they're curious, they're investigative, they're thoughtful, they're objective, analytical, they're great in a crisis because they're detached sometimes from their emotions. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but they can remain incredibly calm through tumultuous times. They can sometimes be, this is the flip side, again, part of the Enneagram is digging up the things underneath the surface, sometimes be withholding, detached, private, or remote. Their virtue, what they bring to others when they're in health, when they're healthy, is knowledge. And usually humility, like a humble knowledge, a humble wisdom. Their vice, their sin, their struggle, where sometimes they get hooked, is something called avarice. They hoard. But it's not a hoarding of material possessions, like a nice house or a nice car. It's a hoarding of knowledge. And that hoarding comes from this idea of I don't have enough yet. I don't feel smart enough. I don't feel like I have enough knowledge to weigh in on this topic, if that makes sense. So some well-known examples to kind of help us understand a little bit more of who this type of person is. Many people suggest Buddha was a type 5. Albert Einstein. You're in good company if you're a 5, by the way. Stephen Hawking, Emily Dickinson, Friedrich Nietzsche, Stephen King, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jane Goodall, Eckhart Tolle. If you notice here, one of the biggest gaps, if you're just looking visually on the Enneagram, you can look at your bulletin again, is there's a big gap between 4 and 5. There's like this open space here. And some people have suggested it's partially because the 2, 3, and 4 is in the feeling triad, and 4s especially are so enveloped in their feeling. I feel like doing this, I feel emotional, I'm up and down, I'm all over the place. It's almost like I feel, therefore I am. The 5 is disconnected from their emotions, but they're so in tune with their thoughts. It's the saying, I think, therefore I am. And so there's a big leap between here because 4s are so feeling-oriented in their emotions, and 5s are so thinking-oriented and processing and observing all the time. There's strengths, of course, and weaknesses in both. And if you look at the symbol, if you get confused or like, what is all these lines? Oh my goodness. There's two lines leading out of each type. So the 5 is connected to a type 7 and a type 8. And what's that suggestive of is that all of us kind of have a base note, where we are normally, how we operate, how we live in the world. But then under stress, under disintegration, we act and we take on different characteristics, and then under health and integration, we take on other characteristics as well. So it kind of takes into the fluidity of our personality and how we operate in the world. Everybody still tracking? So 5s, under stress, 5s are normally very observant, very focused, very, sometimes intense, but they're able to focus on things in very deep ways. Under stress, they can become, and they take on some of the characteristics negative of 7, where they become scattered. Their thoughts are here, I'm not sure. 7s, by the way, we haven't talked about, are the enthusiasts. They're wonderful in that they can connect this and that, and their minds are go. Well, this sounds great, and that sounds, and they can jump from topic to topic, but for a 5, they take on some of that in stress, where it's like, I can't focus in this and this and this, and I can't get clarity. So they can become a little bit scattered in that way. But when they move towards health, they take on some of the positive characteristics of type 8, which is 8s are some of the most embodied people in that gut triad. 5s can be disconnected from their bodies, but in health they become more embodied, and they also become more confident. 8s are some of the most confident types of people, so they take on those characteristics to some extent. Some biblical examples. Joseph and Nicodemus. These are archetypal 5s. Joseph in the coat of many colors gets basically sold into slavery by his brothers, separated from his family, and has to figure out how to survive in a whole different context, right? And he interprets dreams, and then he interprets, what do we do now that famine's coming? How do we make sure everybody gets food? How do we think through this process? Nicodemus comes to Jesus as a religious teacher, and the story in the Gospels is in the midst of the night. Somewhat reflecting some of the struggles of the 5, which is fear. Like, I don't have enough knowledge. I'm not sure about this yet. And we see Nicodemus as a religious leader coming to Jesus in the night and saying, tell me more about this teaching, about this way of living. I don't quite understand it. Jesus, of course, talks about being born again, and Nicodemus wrestles with that question. What does that mean? And then both of these characters, they experience a major shifts in roles of their community. They're able to integrate and reach out and to interconnect with others, which we'll talk about in a bit. Joseph connecting back with his family, and Nicodemus with a sort of new spiritual community. I've given just a short scripture verse of each type, and for the 5, for wisdom and knowledge, what book comes to mind in the Bible? Anybody have? Proverbs? I think it's Proverbs. So you could take out almost any text in Proverbs, which is a very 5-ish book. Proverbs 15:14 says, the discerning heart seeks knowledge, but the mouth of a fool feeds on folly. 5s are some of the most discerning and knowledgeable types of people. Their strengths of these types of people, they're curious and knowledgeable. They're always interested in the world and in people and what's going on. They're calm and objective in crisis. They're dependable. They're also minimalist. Again, coming back to that avarice, that hoarding, it's not about material possessions, which they don't really care about. And so they can do without. It's not about a big house or a fancy car or anything like that. Any of the 5s like, no, it's I don't mind, but knowledge and insight and what's going on and understanding is huge. They also can be very innovative. Mark Zuckerberg, Albert Einstein. I mean, because of the way their brain works, they can think about things and innovate new things. Then we go to the spiritual practices, and this is where I hope that we begin, if you're this type, or you know somebody, you can begin to process this, but especially if you're this type, begin to find things that, again, will help get you out of the box that sometimes we put ourselves in. And maybe even if you're not this type, you can think of some of these practices that might be helpful. Explore how often your actions are driven by fear. Ask yourself that question. Learn to value interdependence, which for people that I want to rely on myself can be hard at times. Explore scarcity versus abundance. Journal, what emotions do I feel? It might be a helpful practice for a 5 at the end of the day, almost like an Ignatian practice. Instead of going through and saying, this is what happened, this is where I saw God, to pause and to say, what happened in my life? What emotions did it bring up? Because 5s are sometimes described as people, they have emotions like everybody else. They just almost experience them later. And so stopping at the end of the day and saying, what did that bring up within me? What happened to me? Is a way of bringing that up and kind of stirring the pot and allowing those things to come forward. Taking action without knowing everything. Not suggesting you go and you say, I'm going to just go buy a car. I don't care if I have money or what it is. That's not what I'm trying to suggest, but taking an action without having all of the information. Stepping out in the midst of that. And the last one is yoga or mind-body exercise. Again, for these people to get connected to their body, whatever that looks like. Yoga is a great practice, other things. How do I get in touch? How do I get connected to who I am in that source? For 5s, connecting to your body and emotions and learning to live with an abundance. 5 often feel overwhelmed by the world. People describe this, and some of the 5s I know I've talked about, every interaction with somebody saps energy from them. For some people, they get energy, right? Every interaction is like, oh, it's like fueling. But for 5s, it's like, oh, every time I talk to Walker, I might enjoy it, but it drains a little bit of me. Same with Sarah. And same with everybody else. So not pointing out. Sorry, Walker. We're naming names. Yeah. Be careful, because they'll have microphones someday. But it's drained. Every interaction for a 5 drains them. So one of the healthy things, and from what I've seen of 5s, what they've talked about is, how do I create rhythms to my life, especially work and life, where I don't give all of my energy to work or school or whatever that is, but I have enough energy to give to relationships that are extremely important. Because if you're not careful, when you come home at night, if you're doing work that exhausts you, you have no more energy for things that are important for you. So finding a rhythm, finding a job, finding work that doesn't suck everything out of you can be important. And lastly, the prayer is down there. By the way, we have friends from out of town. Emily and Ibrahim, they're visiting from Phoenix. So thank you. I'll point out that Ibrahim is a 5. And I asked him to come and share, and he was like, no. And then, I kid you not, I read this morning, 5s don't like to be put on the spot. They like time for preparation. So there I did, put you on the spot, the thing 5s don't like. But all of these prayers I mentioned before, these are prayers I didn't write, but they were actually given to me by Emily after I did a whole sermon series. I was like, these are good prayers. And they were written, was it the pastor that you guys know that they were written by? Or you got them from her?
I got them.
Got them from her. So that's where these come from. And I invite you, you can read along if you like, or take a posture of prayer. You can read along quietly, but these are prayers specifically for this type of person. But again, you have all types within you, so something here might speak to you. So go ahead and follow along as we close up the type 5, move to type 6. Let us pray. God, give me eyes to see the many ways that life is abundant, the many blessings offered me each day, that I may receive my heart's desire. Empty me now of my need for predictability that stifles at times my spontaneity. Empty me of my stinginess that withholds my own gifts and love from others. Give me the wisdom to know when to think and when to act. Calm my fears of rejection and instill in me the courage to open my heart and share myself with others in ways that cultivate compassion. As I come to my full senses, I offer gratitude for my body's wisdom. May I begin each day grounded in that wisdom and in my presence, knowing that I have enough time, energy, information, and passion to live fully engaged in life. Amen. So the type 5, now moving on to the type 6. Type 6 is sometimes called the loyalist or the guardian. Their core motivation, again, this is the central thing, their core motivation is to have security or have support. Which means the biggest thing they fear is to be in situations where they don't feel like they have support or security. They don't know what's going on, what's expected of them. They feel like they don't have support from other people. Some adjectives that help describe this person. They're dependable, collaborative, team-oriented, trustworthy, dutiful, caring, persevering, analytical. But can sometimes be, on the flip side, doubtful, skeptical, worrying, challenging, and fearful. Their virtue that they bring when they're in health is courage, and their vice, their struggle, is anxiety. This is where the fear comes up for this type. It's not so much fear as much as it is anxiety, which has to do with lack of trust of their inner resources. Some well-known examples, there's a lot, so I'll read them semi-quickly. Mark Twain, Sigmund Freud, George H.W. Bush, Princess Diana, J.R.R. Tolkien, Mike Tyson, Bruce Springsteen, Bono, Melissa Etheridge, Oliver Stone, Michael Moore, Spike Lee, Marilyn Monroe, Robert De Niro, David Letterman, Jay Leno, Ellen DeGeneres, Chris Rock. Some of the funniest people you know are 6s because their mind processes really fast and works in a way that they can be really, really witty and really, really funny. And then, anybody read the books or watch Lord of the Rings, by chance? The main character, anybody know the Hobbit's name? Frodo Baggins. Great example of a 6. He starts off very uncertain in this space, especially of his own self in this journey. So fear, anxiety, but yet at the same time this desire to overcome it, so he steps out into that. And in many ways, the whole story can be seen as a 6's journey to integration or to health as he takes those steps. So again, 6s, they're the kinds of people like ones who are very good systems people, because what 6s will do, they'll come into a system, an organization, a group, a project, and their mind automatically goes to trying to poke holes in it. In that, I say that in a positive way, not to like deconstruct it all and say, look, this whole thing is garbage. They look and say, where's the problems here? What about that? So they're the kinds of people that will begin to ask those questions. What about this? And what about that? And where is this part in there? Ones will come in to a situation or a thing and say, oh, that can be better, right? That can be perfected. That can be much better. This is kind of lagging here. We can do a much better job. 6s will come in and say, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? They also are the kinds of people that like to feel prepared. There's a story once of somebody sharing about a type 6. And that they were living in the Bay Area, and they carried with them an earthquake-ready packet everywhere they went, always prepared. Again, sort of that anxiety of what could happen. Well, if it does, I got it, I'm ready, right? So moving, a 6 in stress or disintegration, usually dutiful and works well with others, can take on some of the negative characteristics of the 3. We talked about the 3, the achiever and the performer. So 6s can take on some of the negative characteristics. They can become competitive, arrogant, or workaholics. They're achieving. So under stress, they feel that pressure. I've got to get all this stuff done. But under health, moving towards integration, they take on some of the characteristics of the 9. The peaceful person, right? So the normally anxious 6 in health, and when they feel confident and healthy and moving towards integration, take on some of those peaceful characteristics. And they're at peace with themselves and others. Some biblical examples, Peter and the Maccabean mother. I'll focus more on Peter because he's very well known. But Peter, we see Peter as an archetypal 6, his whole story. And here's one more quick thing about 6s is some people suggest there's 2 kinds of 6s, a phobic and a counterphobic 6. But it's all centered around what they do with fear. What they wherever they fall, they also vacillate between those 2. So sometimes 6s can take that fear and say, man, I have a fear of heights. So I'm going to jump out of an airplane to overcome that fear. I'm going to take that on, which we see in Peter when he's on the boat in the middle of the water, right? Jesus, that's you, tell me to come out, right? I'm going to just take that leap, that step. So even though they struggle with anxiety, it doesn't mean they don't act. It's just sometimes there's that, I want to overcome that thing. Also, we see Peter who, after the death of Jesus, denies that he knew Jesus 3 different times. Sort of this fear-based, I don't want to be associated, no. And we almost see Peter as he's lost. My external authority, this person, Jesus, who I was following, is now dead, and it's sort of, I don't know where I am right now. Probably all felt that before in our lives. So denies that he knew Jesus. Jesus comes back, and we see this beautiful redemptive passage where Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? Yes. And it's almost like Jesus is saying, you're healed, you're here. Trust who you are. Trust in that there's nothing to fear. A scripture verse that sixes embody when they're healthy, Philippians 4:6-7. Do not worry about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So some of the strengths of this type of person, they are extremely loyal friends and partners. They want to be part of a team, a part of a group, and they'll be extremely loyal. They're warm. They're open to others. They work really well with others. They have a great sense of humor. Again, some of the funniest comedians are 6s. They're witty. Their mind processes things really well. And they have a critical mind. Again, they're doubtful, skeptical at times. But that, of course, it can be helpful. It's not always helpful just to accept everything and everyone. But having a critical mind can prove to be very helpful. And there's an intuition that they have because of that. Because at times, they're like, who are you? Who are you, Dale? As I'm picking at everyone. Can I trust you? Are you trustworthy? You know, and they'll pick up on things other people won't, that are just like, hey, Dale, he's great. 6s will like, at first, I'm not sure. You know, I want to get to know you first. And then once they know you, they're extremely loyal. So some spiritual practices that might help this type of person, if you find that this might be you. Check in with others about the fear you have. If you can find a core group of other people and check, hey, I'm struggling with this over here. Should I be struggling with that? Is this reasonable? What do you guys think? Help me out here. Again, because 6s will doubt themselves, naturally begin that way. It can help to find somebody else. No, actually, you know what? I don't think you have anything to be concerned about there. Centering prayer or meditation, extremely helpful for everybody, but probably most helpful for a 6 who struggles with anxiety, you know, different things. How can I center myself? How can I sort of allow my mind to open up and set it aside over here and just find this sort of centered peace and calm? Limit time watching news or other anxiety-producing things. Maybe that's good for all of us. Developing faith in yourself. Man, I'm just throwing out things that it's like, oh, you can talk about that. What does that mean? How do we develop faith in yourself? Sometimes that just means stepping out and also looking back. When you're faced with a new situation and you're struggling, maybe looking back, okay, I've overcome this and this and this and this in my life. I can navigate this situation just fine. Just knowing my tendencies to doubt myself, and as I look back, okay, I've been all right. Accepting uncertainty and doubt as a part of faith. It's a part of the spiritual journey. It's a part of that, and learning to be comfortable in that. A lot of growth can happen when 6s become aware of their doubtful mind and that anxiety. And again, with today's news cycle and the internet and everything else, we're constantly being bombarded with things in the world today and violence. This might be the most helpful thing for a 6, but also for all of us in the midst of all these things, to ask yourself this question. What hobbies or practices help me experience a sense of peace and calm? What are those things? Is it gardening? Is it going to a concert? Where do I find that sense? Because if you're always being stirred up and you're always anxiety producing and fear, then you need to find a place of peace in your life. Would you join me as I pray the prayer of the type 6? God, you are within me and beyond me, forever present. Your love enfolds me as I go about my days. I am not alone. My suspicions fade when held in your unwavering assurance of me. Empty me now of my anxieties and imaginings. I don't know that word. Yes, my fears. Create in me a refuge for trusting myself. Remind me of my inner resources and power. All that I need is within me. My act is to call forth and trust as I stand out on my own solid foundation, knowing your steady ground is with me. I move forward in an uncertain world. Guide me as I travel the path of courage, so I may lean into myself when the waters are troubled, having faith in the unfolding, growing mystery into my own authority. Hold me in the fearful times, and hold me in the fearless times. In your holy ground I rise to offer my full and powerful self in each moment. Amen.
Today's reading comes from the Wisdom Book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 1 through 26. As I read the following verses, I invite you to consider the role of knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and trust in something beyond yourself, in your life now and into the future. My children, don't ever forget these lessons and keep these principles in your heart. They'll bring you length of days, years of life, and above all, peace and prosperity. Never let love and faithfulness abandon you. Wear them like a necklace around your neck. Inscribe them on the tablet of your heart. Then you'll enjoy kindness and a good reputation from God and people. Trust Yahweh with your heart, and don't rely on your own understanding. Acknowledge God in everything you do, and God will direct your paths. Don't be wise in your own eye. Revere Yahweh and avoid evil. This will provide health to your body and enrichment to your bones. Honor Yahweh with all you have and with the first and best part of what you create. Then your silos will be filled with wheat and your barrels filled with wine. My children, don't despise God's reprimand or let it discourage you. For God's discipline is a sign of divine love, the way a parent corrects a beloved child. Happy are you when you find wisdom, when you develop discernment, for she is more profitable than silver and brings yields greater than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you can conceivably desire can equal her value. She holds long life in one hand, riches and honor in the other. Her paths are pleasant ones, and all her roads lead to peace. She is the tree of life for those who embrace her, and all who hold fast to her find happiness. For it was through her Yahweh laid the earth's foundation, through her that the heavens were set in place. By God's knowledge, the depths were deepened and clouds dropped down dew. My children, maintain sound wisdom and right judgment, and don't let them out of your sight, for they will be the life of your soul and jewels around your neck. Then your journey will be secure and your feet won't stumble. When you sit down, you won't be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. So don't fear sudden disaster or the ruin that comes to corrupt individuals, for Yahweh is your insurance and will keep your feet from the snare. May God add wisdom to the hearing of these words.